Today on Locked On Canadiens, have we been too hard on Nick Suzuki?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1194, which is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. And today I'm not joined by my wonderful co-host Ian Boisvert. Ian has the night off. It is Thanksgiving in the US, and I really hope he's having a wonderful time. I will be grilling him about the Thanksgiving dinner when he comes back. He'll be back for that Monday episode. He's also going to be on Game Over, actually, after the Sunday game with the wonderful Kay Mom of Game Over. So that's just a plug for his appearance. Definitely check him out. All right. Today's episode is going to be slightly shorter than usual, just because we did not have extensive mailbag questions today. Sometimes we have too many to fit into an episode. Sometimes we don't have all that much, but I did want to get to the questions that we did get, as well as a quick weekend preview. There are 2 games this weekend, and we're going to get into that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about a listener had a comment about how we were pretty hard on Nick Suzuki. And in fact, we have been a couple of times the last little stretch. And then in the mailbag, we've got a really intriguing question about Kirby Dach being given more responsibility. Always thoughtful questions, always amazing questions from all of you. But first, let's talk about the weekend games. First up, we have the New York Rangers at 1 p.m. on Saturday, and that never bodes well for the Canadiens. And I've also got some more bad news for the Canadiens. Now, the New York Rangers, as we talked about this week, are in a bit of disarray. There's rumors that Chris Kreider is on the trading block, as well as Jacob Trouba's always on the trading block. I feel like it's been a year that they've been trying to get rid of him, and it's proving to be really tough. I don't necessarily buy that Kreider is, though. I do think that the Rangers are just trying to get people to call them so that they can start negotiating and sending off other players. I also know that James Dolan is the owner is a little bit impatient, shall we say, and I do believe he put Chris Drury into place so that he would listen to him and do everything he wanted. So I do think that there's a possibility of a shakeup at this point that I'm recording this. Nothing has happened, but there's a lot of talk right now. And again, more bad news for the Montreal Canadiens. The New York Rangers have lost 4 in a row. Their last 4 games, they've lost 4 in a row. In the last 10 games, they're 4-6-0. And that just screams like afternoon game, a slumping team. It just wildly screams loss for the Montreal Canadiens. So I'm not super hopeful about the game. So I'm really quickly, though, going to say what are the keys to the game, because my co-host is not here. I do have to honor his key to the game. His key to every single game is to protect the puck, obviously. We don't really have any lineup news right now at this time that I'm recording this. Again, it is Thursday evening. It's not even Friday yet. So we're not super sure at this point who's going to be playing. But I just think that in this game, the biggest thing for me, like my key for the game, is show up on time, show up at puck drop, and play the whole 60 minutes. It sounds like a cliche. It literally sounds like the same thing year over and over again, but it's a 1 p.m. game. We've seen so many times mediocre teams, in particular the Canadiens, they show up at 1 p.m. and it's like they're still taking their pregame nap. They literally cannot put it together, and teams basically skate circles around them. We do not want that. We saw a great penalty kill the last couple of games. I do think that they are going to have to be a factor in this game. We've seen a couple of games now with Lane Hudson on the first PP wave, and it hasn't really yielded all that many results. But I think this is one of those things where it can't hurt, right? So if Mathis is not playing and he's on the first PP unit, I think it's going to be totally fine. And then after the Rangers, we have the Boston Bruins. this thing I discovered when I was looking up the Boston Bruins and how they're doing currently is that also the Rangers are in a wild card spot right now. They're not they're not at the top of the division. They're fourth in their division. They're in a wild card spot though. But in the Atlantic Division, the Boston Bruins sit third. They are still firmly in a playoff spot. They've played a couple more games than everybody else, but they are still alive, let's say. And I think that shows a little bit more about the quality of competition or the quality of the division, not competition, the division. But hilariously, even though they're sitting third, their goal differential is minus 18. The only worst one is the Montreal Canadiens at minus 21 in the division, although there are worse ones in the league. I really just quickly want to mention the Penguins are at a minus 33 goal differential. And I do believe they're the worst ones. Then there's the Sharks at minus 23. And then there's the Montreal Canadiens at minus 21. So we're not doing super great over here. All right. One of the things that I do want the Montreal Canadiens to do with both of these teams is the Boston Bruins seem to be sort of getting it together, riding the ship. The Rangers are just a mess. But one thing that we talk about is this team, this whole season, other than a couple of games, a handful of games, has had no killer instinct. They don't play like they know what they need to do. They don't play like they know that they need to capitalize on their opponents. They don't show us anything or their opponents anything to be afraid of. And I think that's something that's going to really hurt them. Particularly against the Rangers, just because I feel that the Rangers are they're due for having a game where they absolutely dominate their opponent and then sort of figure out the rest of their season. Whereas with the Boston Bruins, I just really don't want anyone to get injured. That's always my hope against Bruins games, is that no shenanigans. I don't want anything happening that both Montreal and Boston media will be talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. I don't want any of that. I'm not even expecting, I'm going to be really honest, I'm not expecting a single point this weekend. And I don't know that I'll be disappointed if they don't get a single point. I want to see them play in a way that does not make me despair for the rest of the season. That's all I'm asking from these players. So definitely they need to be able to get out of their own zone. I want to see them move the puck up the ice. I want to see less drop passes. And one thing that I've noticed is that, we've been complaining a lot about drop passes, particularly on the power play, but there are a couple of players that are particularly prone to doing this, and it really bothers me. Alex Newhook is one of them. He needs to stop doing that. He needs to carry the puck into the zone. Carry it. Just carry it. All of you need to carry the puck into the zone. Like, I think, and obviously that starts with trying to get out of the zone. So I'm really hopeful that the Canadiens don't give us something to despair about. And it's also such a weird schedule too, because the Rangers game is at 1 p.m., but then the Boston game is at 3 p.m. And I get that it's Thanksgiving weekend, et cetera, et cetera. It's such a weird schedule. Not a big fan. That's partly the reason why I don't necessarily think the Canadiens are going to get a point. But if they get 1 point out of 4 this weekend, honestly, I'm going to be over the moon. It's not going to be like like the last couple of games where the Canadiens got 3 out of a possible 4 points. And we were still mad about it. I think it's definitely a situation where we are at American Thanksgiving, which is like sort of an arbitrary marker of whether or not the team is going to be doing well for the rest of the season. And I don't necessarily think that the Canadiens, it's going to be like this for the entire season. I do expect things to get better. I don't expect the Canadiens to challenge or contend for a playoff spot. I don't expect them to be in the mix like Marty St. Louis says. But I do believe that they do have a chance to put together something special and just like give us some fun games, especially the second half of the season. We're not there yet. Patrick Laine so far is he's with the team, but he hasn't been cleared to play. I don't think. So we'll see. I mean, he could make his debut against Boston. I think it's much more likely that he starts playing next week or the week after. but we'll see. And so again, at this time, we don't have roster news, but I'll be really, really excited if he draws into the lineup. There will be some growing pains there as well, though. It's just kind of, remember Kirby Dach coming back from a long and devastating injury. You know, he's had a really rough time back. We are going to talk a little bit more about him in the mailbag in the third segment. But up next, what we have is, were we too harsh on Nick Suzuki? Let's talk about that in just a moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. I love going to live events like hockey games, basketball games, baseball games, concerts, comedy shows. I love doing that. And the best way to do that now is to go through Gametime, because Gametime is the app that takes all the guesswork and all of the frustration out of buying tickets. They've got so many great things. They've got flash deals, they've got last minute ticket deals. You can see the view from your seat, and you can toggle a feature for all-in pricing where you don't see hidden fees. Like, how many times do you get annoyed by hidden fees at checkout? If you toggle this feature all-in pricing, you won't get that. And remember, you're going to be able to see the view from your seat, and you can get deals right up until the last minute. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. This episode is also brought to you by Built. PSA for anyone who rents. If you haven't heard of Built, you're about to thank me. Earning points on rent is now a reality when you pay your rent through Built. You don't even have to check with your landlord to start earning points that you can use towards flights, hotel stays, fitness classes, and even your next rent payment. Let me break it down for you. There's no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world that you can redeem your Built points toward. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnhl. Make sure you use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl to start earning points on your rent payments today. All right, so it is time for the mailbag, and I want to start with some comments. Actually, these weren't actually mailbag questions, but I do want to talk about sometimes like what our listeners sent to us. And one of them was a comment on Nick Suzuki, and this comes from listener Connor Kenny, and it was on YouTube. This is the comment. I really don't understand why you two think Nick is struggling. He's almost a point per game and only a -1 on this team that has lost by 6 goals or more multiple times this year. He's the only player to stay on the top line, constantly having his wingers demoted, and is still very consistent. What more can he realistically do? He's not McDavid. He's not going to be a 100-plus point player. He's already outplaying his contract in terms of AAV. We as Habs fans need to reevaluate our expectations. This team won't be ready to. It says this ran, but I think Connor meant this team. This team won't really be ready to compete for the playoffs or the cup for another 3 years. Most of our recent elite draft picks aren't even playing for the team yet, and about 70% of the current roster won't be there when they are ready. Don't get too attached to players during a rebuild, because some of the ones you like are going to be the pieces we use to get the players we need. And then David responded to that comment. Very good post, realistic take. I look for whatever improvements I can find, enjoy the games, and also watch Laval to see what else is coming. Speaking of Laval, our people are talking to Scott Matla's people to have him on the show as soon as possible. Right now is his extremely busy season for work leading up to the holidays. So it is a little bit hard, but we promise we will bring Scott on to talk Laval and talk prospects because Laval is having a great season so far. Also, I will be going to the PWHL, the season opener for the Montreal Victoire against the Ottawa, is it Charge? The Ottawa whatevers. And I will have a game recap for you guys on the Monday episode or Tuesday episode, depending on how things shake out. Obviously, in the weekend, because we still have our weekly recaps and weekly previews to do, but we will definitely be talking the PWHL season opener experience. And that's also happening in Laval, and I'm so excited. Like this, I mean, it is one of the hottest tickets in town. We're so lucky to have them. And I'm just so excited to come back with a recap. And Laval's doing really well. So Montreal, the NHL team, not so great. PWHL, very promising. AHL, doing really well. So it's not all bad here. And I do want to talk a little bit about Connor's comment. I think one of the biggest issues with Nick Suzuki is managing our expectations, because it feels like he does not dominate games. And I think part of it is also just because he's basically holding the whole thing up, right? He's one of the only players that really knows what he's doing. It is true. We are being a little bit unfair when you contextualize, when first you look at his point total. And also if you look at the constant line blending, carousel, shuffling, whatever it is that Marty has got going. His wingers do keep getting demoted or back to promoted. It's true it's not consistent, but he's still been able to do that. He's obviously the single player who bears the toughest assignments on this team right now. Nobody has tougher assignments than he does. So I do think that we do have to take that a little bit into context. And I do think it's fair because Connor points out that Nick Suzuki is not a 100-plus point player. I don't know that I want to say that. I mean, I want to say that Nick Suzuki is a 90-plus point player. And yes, it's because I'm looking across the Outaouais and at Tim Stützle when I say this. I want Nick Suzuki to be able to put up 90-something points. He has not passed that mark yet. And I think it's true. Like, it is a fine line. We are expecting a lot of him, but I also just think that he carries the team on his back. It's just that the rest of the team has not been playing their part, and he's not very vocal. So I do think that he doesn't have that fiery, he doesn't respond to things the same way Brendan Gallagher does, for example, like, spear people in the groin multiple times because they're bothering you, and then get into a fight with them. He doesn't have that, right? So like sometimes it does feel like he's being a bit quiet in the games, but I do think it's interesting to remember that he can't do much more than what he's currently doing. It's not really his fault that the rest of the team and the coach are holding him back. And I know this is going to get me into a little bit of trouble, but just before we go into our third segment, which is our mailbag, I just want to ask our listeners, like, objectively speaking, do you think Martin St. Louis is a bad coach, a terrible coach, an okay coach, a perfectly good coach? You've got a few options. So what is your honest thoughts on Martin St. Louis' coaching ability? We do have some comments about that so far. I want to know, like, leave it in the comments. Tell us on Blue Sky. We're at Locked On Canadiens. Tell us on Instagram. We're at Locked On Canadiens. We're also on TikTok at Locked On Canadiens. And email, like our email is lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. Leave it in the YouTube, whatever it is. Just tell us, what do you think? I wanted to put up a poll, and my co-host thinks that's playing with fire. But just, do you think Martin St. Louis is a terrible coach objectively? Do you think he's fine and it's the roster that's the problem? Do you think that he's a good coach that doesn't have enough experience? Do you think he's a mediocre coach but not that bad? Tell us what you think. Like, what is your subjective. What is your honest, subjective take? Remove everyone else's opinion. What is your take on Martin St. Louis' coaching abilities? Because it's really interesting, because we get so many diverse perspectives, and people think, right, we talked about this before on this podcast, we are not pro or against Martin St. Louis. We are observers of this game. We're observers of this team. We're fans of this team. We want to see better. And we do think that the roster isn't great. right? The talent on the roster, we might like the guys a lot. The talent on the roster just is not there. It's not what this team needs it to be. So we got to talk about that. So I do want to ask, like, give us your comments, tell us your thoughts. Please be respectful and honest, right? Just like I think it's it's fair to think that he's a terrible coach. If that's your opinion, that's fine. Tell us why you think that, but just be respectful about it, because and don't start arguing with each other. I want to know what people really think, because we get so many different answers, so many different perspectives. People think we're crazy for not thinking he's awful. People think we're too hard on him. What is your honest take? Again, be respectful, no argue. I'm just going to start deleting if there's any arguments. I just want to know, how do you feel about Martin St. Louis' coaching ability? Now, he's probably going to yell at me when he listens to this tomorrow, just because it is playing with fire. I'm curious. I'm curious because I think it's much more varied. The perspectives are much more varied than I initially thought going into this season. All right, our mailbag is next, and we're going to talk a little bit about Kirby Dach, and if giving him more responsibility will make him play better. And that's coming up in just a moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You hear us talk about FanDuel a lot on this podcast, and that's because it is America's #1 sportsbook. One of the reasons is I find it so easy to use, and it's fun. And right now, you can tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. Like I said, it's America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And it's not just NFL. Honestly, there's so many things. MLB, NHL, all kinds of sports you can bet on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started, like I said, with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so the Montreal Canadiens mailbag is up next. And we didn't get so many questions, but I do appreciate all of the commenters and the questions that we get from the listeners. They're always so thoughtful. So one of the Roberts brothers, Kyle, this time, this is directed at Ian, but I'm going to read it anyway. And this was sent, I believe it was sent before the Columbus game. Hi, Ian. Every night the opponent scores first. I'm hoping the Habs can lift the commentator's curse. Please, for the love of Price, burn some sage or a Chris Kreider jersey after you mention that whenever the other team scores first to turn off the TV. Go Habs, go, Kyle. Hi, Ian. So this was the day before the Columbus game, and this is after the Columbus game. Hi, Ian. I just wanted to thank you for burning the sage or the Kreider jersey today. I thought he was initially suggesting to burn Chris Kreider. And I think everyone in Montreal is in agreement with my opinion on that. I can't say it. It'll get me into trouble, so I can't say it on this recording. But you know where I stand. All right. So this is a question from our good friend Claude Sauvé, who always sends us thoughtful emails. Hi, guys. I want to preface this by agreeing with you that firing Marty will not change anything in the short term. My issue is not the X's and O's of hockey, it's attitude. What confirmed my long-time suspicion that attitudes have to change before we ever see long-term success is when the cameras showed the two coaches juxtaposed during the Vegas game. At the time, Vegas was winning 5-2, and Montreal had just scored. Even being up 3 goals, Cassidy did not hesitate in ripping his players a new one. Why? Because standards were not met, and reinforcing those standards are most effective at the moment. The score was irrelevant. Conversely, Marty was just in his usual pose. I don't think Marty has lost the passion he had as a player. I just think he has difficulty conveying that same passion to his players. Being cerebral has its place, in the film room or during practice. During a game is when passion needs to be contagious. Or, here's a thought, during a timeout. So this is really interesting. I love Claude Sauvé's emails. I really do, because they always leave room for thought. So here's where I kind of stand. I think it really depends on if it's passion or if it's just constant yelling, because I know that in any situation, not just coaching but management as well, if you're constantly hard on players, eventually, if that's your default, eventually they tune it out. It just becomes their baseline. It's just they're used to you yelling, they're used to you freaking out. They just tune it out. That's your normal, right? Something else would be out of the ordinary at that point. And so I strongly feel that it's a situation like this is a scenario in which it depends. Like if he is alternating and on the bench, like Claude points out, like there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of fire there. I agree. But if you're always the same way, like I do think that the players like kind of tune you out. And I don't think necessarily that the Habs have tuned Marty out. Like I feel like he still commands that same respect. I just think they don't know what they're doing, and his in-game X's and O strategy kind of stuff, I don't agree with it. I think overall he quote unquote inspires them to be better. I think like when they're practicing things, he's helping them improve like little facets of their game. I just think that the in-game situations, he's just not strong at it. Let's just put it that way. So we've got a question on Blue Sky from Francis. How much did Slav need that goal on a scale of catching your breath to saving your season? So this was like obviously the goal in the Columbus game. I think that Slavkovsky is really responding to what Ian called his medicine by being on that fourth line. I think with Slav, he's still so young and he's still so early in his career that once in a while he does need those reminders, right? Being stapled to the bench the night before, and then coming out and being played on the second line and really responding well to that. I think it is a save your season kind of thing, because I do feel that he's young enough and immature enough as a player where, yes, he's got that talent, he's got that ability, but he may be prone to like slumping and feeling down on himself, and it just becoming like this vicious cycle of him like just not doing okay. Kind of like Cole Caulfield had a few seasons ago under Dominique Ducharme, just kind of getting in his own head, just not being able to bring out the best in himself. All right, so this is our good friend Danny Joe from across the pond. Why are we talking about Raphael Harvey-Pinard getting a shot? Was last year not enough to prove he has no future with this team? Martin St. Louis won't sit a vet, and I will explode if they send out Heineman for a player coming off an injury. I'd rather they played Pizzetta. So I think the thing with RHP is that he has to be played in the NHL now. Pretty much like he's like one of those players that like Ian was talking about yesterday, too good for the AHL, but not necessarily fitting on the NHL team. I think we were talking about Justin Barron yesterday. And so like this kind of feels like that. I don't think that they're going to send down Emil Heineman now. I really don't. Like he has done nothing to show that he deserves to be taken out of this lineup at all. I do think that there'll probably be a situation where they rotate guys. I don't think that you will need to explode Danny. Please don't. We need you. We love your comments. We love your questions. We think that you exploding is not good for the universe. It's not good for the Locked On Canadiens extended universe. So we've got another question from Claude Sauvé to close out the show. I will remember. I will do trivia. Sorry, I will give you the trivia answer from yesterday's question, but you'll have to wait until next week for another trivia question, because I was working really hard to like shoehorn one in, and I just couldn't make it happen. But I promise you, I will make this question happen at some point in the next week or so. And my co-host is not here with a question at the ready, so we'll give you the answer. We'll start fresh on Monday. But first, here's a question from Claude. Hi guys, what do you think about giving Kirby Dach some PK time? I don't think his problem is lack of effort. He just seems to be lost out there. I know giving him more responsibilities seems counterintuitive, but I think killing penalties would force him to get engaged. Having a narrower focus with a different objective might help him get out of his funk. A change is as good as a rest for his noggin. So this is interesting too. Claude, I wonder. Let us know. Are you a manager in your life? Like, are you like a people manager? Are you that kind of person? Because I feel like every time you bring something up, I'm like, oh, that's so good. I should use it on my team. So I think giving more responsibilities, like I do think that's a really intriguing possibility. I find that sometimes it gives somebody who lacks confidence confident, like it's conversely gives them more confidence if you add more responsibilities to their plate. I have seen that work. I also do think that giving him a different focus, like Claude said, it'll make him more engaged because he's lost out there, right? He's trying to figure out how to play hockey again. Like it was a long time for him away from the ice, and it's probably also that he has to adjust the way he plays and the way he skates due to his injury, and he's probably trying to find himself out there. But I think it's an intriguing idea to give him a tough assignment, a new and tough assignment, and kind of see if that is gonna like help him lock in. All right, so we did have a listener who did get the answer to yesterday's trivia question, which again, this is not me. Um, this is my co-host. He's the one who like dreams all of these questions up all the time. He's brilliant. And so the question was who scored the first ever goal against the Columbus franchise from the Montreal Canadiens? The answer is, interestingly enough, the first game ever, the Canadiens got shut out. And so the next game they played against Columbus, which was on April 6, 2002, Stéphane Quintal was the one who scored the first ever goal against Columbus. And the Canadiens ended up winning 4-1 that day. So that is your trivia answer from yesterday. I hope I did that right, Ian. And so we'll get more questions as of Monday. For now, I just want to wish everyone a great weekend if you have a long weekend, great normal weekend if, like me, you're in Canada. We'll see you after the games on Monday. In the meantime, please make sure that you subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, tell your friends about us. We work so hard to make the show engaging, even though the Canadiens usually aren't. Thank you so much for your mailbag questions. You can always send them to us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. We've migrated over to Blue Sky, and our usernames are The Active Stick, and maybe it's Ian all over social media. We are on Blue Sky as Locked On Canadiens. We're on Instagram as Locked On Canadiens. Our Gmail is Locked On Canadiens. Our TikTok is Locked On Canadiens. We're pretty much Locked On Canadiens. Everywhere you can contact us, please send mailbag questions, send us comments, and also answer my question about Marty. But again, be respectful, because otherwise I'm just going to delete and block. Thank you so much for listening, and we will both see you on Monday.